Hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining. We're just letting people through, but we'll make a start. Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Will Sibley. I'm one of the account executives at LandApp and delighted to be welcoming you to today's webinar. I have my colleague Rosie Johnson here with me, who's going to be sorting out some of the Q&A with you all. This is my second webinar that I've led at LandApp, so you probably won't recognise me if you didn't attend the last webinar about a month ago, an Ordnance Survey data. Previous role, I used to work for Leaf and started at LandApp in September, and spoken to many different of our users, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, and just a range of so many cases and sectors were using LandApp, which has been a pleasure to support and learn from. And I can see, I think I'm expecting a diverse range being reflected today in our audience, which will be focusing on regenerative agriculture. So before we make a start, I'll just go through a bit of housekeeping before running through the agenda. As I said, I'll be your host alongside Rosie. So I'll be working through a demo for the most part. We are recording this session, so your cameras and microphones will be turned off, but that doesn't mean to say we do not want to hear from you. Actually, a great part of why we do these webinars is that we do hear from our audiences and users. So please don't be afraid to send in your questions to the Q&A function, which should be somewhere at the bottom of your Zoom window. And we've saved some time at the end to just go through that Q&A. The webinar, as I said, will be recorded and it will be added to our YouTube in about 3 to 5 working days, depending on how busy our marketing team are. So you can watch back. And then lastly, we do have a feedback survey at the end of this webinar when it closes, and please do fill that in. Only take a minute or so, and we really appreciate any feedback you can give us on these webinars. Great, then looking at the agenda. So this is very much following Groundswell a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be focusing on mapping regenerative agriculture in LandApp today. I think the purpose is that we want all of you in the audience to have a better understanding of how you can quite simply just map out the different regenerative agricultural practices that you might be doing on farms or advising farms to do, and creating a bit of a baseline in LandApp, which of course is an important aspect to regenerative agriculture. And then secondly, we want everyone here to just be more aware or know how to use some of the data download tools in LandApp that are really great for suggesting different interventions and practices that farms can make. And that's determined where they are spatially. There's a lot of hidden gems in there that's going to help you make informed decisions under this lens of regenerative agriculture. So we'll work through that, and that's going to be in a demo for about 30 minutes. And then again, we've saved some Q&A time at the end. Brilliant. I'll go over a few product updates in a sec, but on these webinars, we do always put them recordings to our YouTube channel if you want to watch this back. And there's also a range of different webinar recordings looking at different themes on our YouTube channel. And it's a great resource if you do want to go back or you want to learn about a particular function or workflow that we've covered previously in a webinar in one foul swoop within an hour, end to end. It's a really good resource there, but we do also have really quick kind of 2 3 minute walkthrough videos if you like, if you do want to look at things quickly, such as our LandApp mobile. So a great resource there. We also have our online help center, which has got plenty of different articles on how to do different functions basically. And of course, our live customer support chat that you'll be able to find in LandApp at the bottom right of your screen. There are humans behind that. You might be familiar with similar, but myself and Rosie are on the end of that too sometimes. So please do submit your questions and queries through there as well. Quickly to give a couple of updates, and we'll go on to the product updates in a sec, but I just wanted to cover some of these events. The first two have already happened. So we had the National Silver Lapwing Awards led by Fwag, which was a brilliant event from what we've heard on the Isle of Man from one of our directors, Dan. And congratulations, Andrew Bott, for winning this year's award. He's an arable farmer down in Hertfordshire and doing some brilliant stuff around soil health, habitat creation, and just his general passion for nature, I've heard is really brilliant and contagious. So well done, Andrew. Groundswell, we've mentioned this was the first time that the Land team managed to get a stand at Groundswell, and thank you for anyone in the audience that did drop by. Regenerative agriculture is very fresh in our minds at the moment, so that's partly why we've chosen today's theme. But what a fantastic event! Many different stories from farmers coming out of Groundswell. I think that's one of the most powerful things around regenerative agriculture. So brilliant and inspiring to hear different farmers talk about their journey. And then lastly, but one's coming up, we've got the agroforestry show. Again, another event in Hertfordshire at Wood Oaks Farm down in Maple Cross. We are sponsoring that event and also have a stand. So if you are attending that event, please do drop by around all things agroforestry. So really looking forward to that too. Looking at a few product updates now, some of which are actually already in app, and then most are coming on, I think, Wednesday next week. Starting with these two, we've added the whole farm biodiversity audit template. So this is applicable to farms in Scotland. And I believe this is now a requirement from the Scottish government for all farms in Scotland to create this biodiversity audit map or baseline in effect. So this template helps you build that baseline by selecting different available habitat types and has that default styling. So you can see there, conifer plantation, rush pasture, excuse me. And we've also added the ability in Land App that you can copy that template straight into the baseline habitat assessment. If you're familiar with how you can do that from the BPS template into the baseline habitat assessment, you can do the same with this whole farm biodiversity audit plan as well. So really helping to streamline things and obviously avoiding any duplication that might happen. So you can copy that straight in, and those habitat types will pre-populate with the ones that you want in the baseline habitat assessment, which is great. And then secondly, on the right there, we've created a new ability with our data layers that you can adjust the transparency. So you can do the same with styling in Land App, but now we've added that ability for the data layers too, which just helps greatly around just visualizing things. If you do prefer to turn down that transparency, you can do. You can see that little video there in action. Secondly, around new data layers, there's quite a few coming next week in the product update. We are adding the environmental stewardship agreements and options for England as a data layer. If you've used the countryside stewardship data layers in LandUp, it's very much the same thing. So you have one for different agreements that are live. You can see those spatially. And likewise for the different options there, you can see those. Secondly, we brought in the woodland carbon code. So this is a data layer that identifies the locations of woodland carbon code certified projects across the UK. So that demonstrates where verified carbon sequestration for woodlands, specifically woodland creation, is taking place. And that also is divided into those that are validated and those that are under development, which is an interesting one. Thirdly, a new peat map that's come from Natural England, and this is a really brilliant piece or brilliant set of data that you'll soon be able to overlay into Land App. So that's representing a new nationwide map of different peat and peaty soil extent across England. Overland flow pathways. So this was a really requested one from our users. This data identifies basically the likely routes that water takes across the land surface, highlighting areas that are prone to where water is going to accumulate, potentially areas of pollution, and maybe cause soil erosion. And that's part of the Environment Agency's alert tool. So that's a really key one that I think is actually already in. Yeah, it is already in Land App because I've got an example there of the overland flow pathways going across those kind of green and red lines showing where there's steep areas and water flows likely to be. And then lastly, coming out in our professional subscription on Wednesday is the BNG register or BNG sites. There'll be different point locations and there'll be information associated with those points for all different sites on the BNG register. So hopefully that all sounds interesting and is going to be useful for everyone in the audience there. And again, that's coming out on Wednesday next week. Okay, getting on to regenerative agriculture now, I know most of you in the audience will definitely be familiar with regenerative agriculture, so I won't go into too much detail of what that is. What I will say is that restoring and enhancing the health of the land, particularly the soil, is really at the heart of regenerative agriculture, and that's aiming to reverse degradation caused by or associated with conventional farming practices at times to ultimately build more resilient, productive ecosystems and farm systems too. And we need healthy ecosystems for food security. Following those five principles, and we will keep those in our mind, and I'll refer to those in a demo as we go through, of limiting soil disturbance and structure. So that's really protecting soil structures, allowing those microbes to thrive and be maintained in the soil. And this is where you want to avoid things like the plough or low till when you can, as well as direct drilling when possible. Protecting the soil surface with covers. So that's both with living plants or sometimes residues to not only build fertility back into the soil that's been taken out from growing crops, but again, aiming to prevent things like erosion and runoff and leaching that might happen without those covers, plus also providing different habitats for key organisms, insects, birds, etc. It's kind of a dual function there around covers. Maintaining living roots, so we keep living roots from plants in the ground for as much years as possible, providing that continued food source again for what's going on below ground and those microbes, but also really important for nutrient cycling. Roots kind of being almost the conductors, if you like, and then also improving soil structure. Integrating animals, so again on that nutrient cycling trail of thought, animals are key to that. And that also the grazing stimulates plant growth, neutralizing different nutrient cycles that are going on. And then lastly, diversity in both crops that are grown and then ecology too. So yeah, noticing all of those five elements, they're very much interlinked and overlapped, and practices that are associated with them is going to impact all five principles at the same time. And I think the mantra is not to think of one at once or individually, think about all of them when making different decisions on the farm, and different relevant practices and interventions are going to be multifunctional. So they'll probably address a lot of those principles at the same time. Regenerative agriculture is going to look different to every farm up and down the country. If you're an arable mixed with livestock in Hertfordshire, that regenerative agriculture is going to look different to a farm if you're growing vegetables up in Norfolk. And it's hard to define and also hard to navigate for farmers too. So at least what Land App helps with is it's allowing users to understand and basically visualize different contexts that might influence that navigation, and also gives the ability to create simply illustrate different crops, infrastructure, practices that are all going to fall under that lens of regenerative agriculture. So that's the kind of trail of thought and basis of what we'll show in the demo today. We'll divide it into two parts. So the first part being that we'll work through an example baseline farm rotation, if you like, and use different data layers in LandApp to help us understand context. But also we'll mainly look at the RPA import into the basic payment scheme template and use the different drawing features to basically compile a nice looking farm rotation baseline. something like that. And you'll notice the colors in those two images there. We've got kind of the more conventional farm rotation on the left, whereas we've got a more regenerative farm rotation on the right, and it's more colorful. So using that, the more color that's on your map, the more diverse your system and rotation is looking. So that's quite a nice way to think about it. We'll also dip into the Land App Mobile in the demo, which is exciting. And if you haven't seen the demo of the Land App yet, this is your chance. It's fairly new. I think it's September that it was launched, and very recently we've brought in the ability that you can view all your plans that you've drawn from your desktop into the Land App Mobile, which previously you weren't able to do. So that's a massive improvement that we've made. You can use this offline, so you don't need signal to use Land App Mobile. It uses GPS, so you could be, I don't know, in the far reaches of the Shetland Islands or somewhere without signal for miles. You'd still be able to use Land App Mobile. You can take photos in app as well as upload photos from your phone, and if they are geotagged, they will plonk on your map exactly where they were taken. So for things like evidencing just recording a cover crop, for instance, you can do that through the mobile app when out in the field. And then lastly, it works same with that live editing and collaboration. So I could be sat in my office on Land App, and Rosie could be out in the field editing on Land App. I'd see those live updates there too. So we'll go through that for a short few minutes in the demo. And then lastly, looking at the latter half of this presentation, we'll look at those different data downloads that I mentioned. There's a whole range, but I've highlighted some here around wet landscapes, agroforestry, wild edges, and e-planner. These are really helpful for suggesting geospatially different areas on your map that could be best placed, if you like, for different sorts of interventions, depending on um, what your what your motive is. So hope that sounds all good. And then we'll jump straight into the demo now. Oops. I'll just open up my Land App account and start creating a map. I've actually created one in preparation for this demo here, titled Regen Ag Webinar. We'll just open this up. You'll notice I do have a series of plans or folders, if you like, shown here. We'll ignore those for the minute and just start to set up and import our boundary for our map. I'll choose the Ordnance Survey Lite base map for this demo just because I quite like it. It's a good, clean, crisp base map, and it contrasts against the styling of your map quite well. And we'll go straight to new and import data, and we use the RPA import here. For anyone that hasn't used this before or seen this, I'll quickly recap. It's a direct link with the Rural Payments Agency's mapping portal, and you'll need an SBI number to use this import. And we can select of three different data sets. Almost always you want to select land covers, and that will show you the different covers on each parcel, as well as hedges. Why not? Click Next, and we'll also choose the basic payment scheme template, like so. Call it BPS demo, like so. So what's happening here? Triggering that using my SBI number, that's sent off that to the RPA portal, almost like a reference, which has then sent back the data around our farm boundary and also the parcel breakdown too, and pre-populated the land covers over each parcel and come with a default styling, which is great. So we're down in Surrey here, and one of our board members, Ed, has kindly shared his SBI number for the demo, and we'll click on any of these parcels and we'll see that it's populated the land cover, which is permanent grassland, and it's included things like field ID, parcel ID, sheet ID, which is pretty important for your recording, but also dealings with the RPA. And if you are going ahead with applications to agri-environment schemes, this is a really useful aspect there. So you'll notice it's quite a livestock based or pasture-based system, just for the purpose of this demo, I'm actually going to change a few of these parcels into some arable um, crops. Just give it a new styling. And this goes the same when you do import this, it will send back the latest update that it has with the RPA. So it might be a bit off of what you're actually growing. And if you do need to change that, you can just do this like so and just change the attribute. So we'll change this to barley. Great, and give that also a nice styling there. Okay, looking at context around the farm, we've got our kind of basic baseline from a farm or crop rotation point of view here with that styling. We'll then begin to look at the different data layers that might be of use here to create that context. So for a start, that's going to be useful, we've got the agricultural land classification, like so, for England. And we can see here that this entire farm is pretty much in grade four. So we probably don't want to be thinking about growing crops here, but for the demo, we will. Looking more at pasture for grade four, probably. And over here, we've got grade three, etc. So that's a useful data layer just to tell us what land classification we're in. We can also look at things like ancient woodland, looking at different potential habitats that are around. So we can see to the south here of Ed's farm, we've got some ancient and semi-natural woodland. So you might want to think about protecting that through our practices down here. We've also got a great one, I think, in Land App called beelines, which is essentially a network across the whole of the UK around where insects and key pollinators are going to migrate across the land and travel for food sources. And we can see that Ed's farm here is slap bang in the middle of this beeline that's going across Surrey. So we want to start thinking about, right, my farm is an integral place for supporting pollinators. I need those for pollinating my crops. Let's think about how we work around that through our farming system, like so. Just turn that off. Another one that I think is really good for setting context is UCO's keeping rivers cool riparian buffers. So this is showing different areas on my map where there are water courses without any shade from riparian buffers within 50 meters. So these are basically areas that we want to focus. How can I support this area, the water flow going through this area with riparian buffers and all um, the habitat that that creates and different wildlife that's associated with. So a really good one just to switch on. But I think we're okay in Ed's farm here, apart from that little corner up there. And then lastly, I think a key one we'll look at here is nitrate vulnerable zones. So a good bit of practice, you can check if you're in an MVZ with these data layers on your farm, you can see that Ed is right on the edge of the Cranley Waters nitrate vulnerable zone. So with that information, we want to make sure that we're building fertility naturally. So with covers, with different cover crops, maybe some of the practices that we're doing want to avoid or at least reduce our artificial fertilizer inputs because there's a high risk here of that leaching into our watercourses and groundwater, etc. So that's something important to bear in mind. I think that segues nicely into the next couple of steps that we'll go through now. We'll go on that trail of thought of wanting to build fertility in a more regenerative way. And what I quite like to do is actually map that separately in a different plan. So what we'll do, we'll select, I'm just holding my shift button down and clicking the different polygons here to bulk select the different areas we want to highlight, and then we'll click copy to plan and create a new plan here. Just call it covers. Call it August 25, and we'll stick with the basic payment scheme template for this one. And from there, we can just turn those off and then start mapping those different types of practices that we're thinking about in our farm system. So here, for instance, we could change the styling with a pattern like so. We can change that to maybe something green there and label it something like living mulch trial 1. So we might be thinking about how do we establish a living mulch of clover. So I think white clover, also subterranean clover, a really good kind of low crawling species or types that are quite successful there. We want to maintain that sort of blanket, if you like, of a living mulch, which we can then go back over 1 or 2 years and plant our crops in. We can just turn that label on. Here, we might want to trial something new. So something like intercropping. So we're looking at growing 2 different crops at the same time in the same place. And usually, typically, you might want to think about your main crop, which in this case, it would be wheat, but we could incorporate a certain level of field beans in here too. Field beans obviously being key to building nitrogen as well. So we again could change the style. Let's go for this pattern here or this one. And again, call it or just call it winter wheat slash field beans. And give that a go there just by illustrating it on our map. We could, for these 2 fields, if we're looking at those different drilling practices, so how we prepare the ground when we drill seeds, we might want to go a min-till if that's applicable, or a direct drill. And again, we can just work through like that, give it a different styling. Let's go this one, give it a red, and just name that direct drill. If you wanted to, you could also add new attributes down here of something like drilled, give it a date. So let's go, we're working in this year. It might be quite an early one because some harvests are already happening. Let's go right to the 28th of August there and show on map. And we can do that if we want to, which is quite a nice one. And then looking at the more, I guess, outside of production methods, so we might want to add something like a buffer to one of our fields here. And we'll look at this field of barley by going to the buffer tool, clicking side 1 for the outside, but in this case, we want to click side 2, which is the inside. And let's give it quite a small one, as it's a small field of a 12-meter buffer, and then click subtract like so. Again, we can follow exactly that same process. This time, let's go with that one. Give it quite a light one. And then just call it margin here. Like so. So you can just sense from this that we can slowly build a more colourful covers map to illustrate the different practices that we're getting up to and the great things that regenerative farmers are doing. The benefit of having that in a separate plan is that we can basically keep our farm rotation baseline here in the BPS demo. And we probably want to do that as technically the purpose, or I guess the land use that we are undertaking with these fields is growing crops. But we've also got that element there that we can overlay our covers if we wanted to, which is great. And a good way of illustrating it. Second point that I'll quickly move on to is thinking about livestock. So we are predominantly a livestock farm here with lots of permanent pasture, and we're thinking about how do we manage those animals in terms of their grazing rotation, but also what are they grazing on? And we might be thinking about herbal lays, which I think are brilliant, diverse swards, if you like, full of things like chicory, burnets, cocksfoot, all the different plants that could give different functions. So it could be really deep roots, it could be shallow roots, or it could be positive um, or beneficial nutrition for the animals. Again, looking at a second plan, if we want to illustrate where our grazing rotation, maybe in the form of paddocks, will want to go, again, it's a good idea to just copy those areas that we got on our map into a separate plan. This time, call it grazing rotation, if I can spell. There we go. And this time we'll probably want to use the blank template because it's got things like fencing, which we want to put in here. And of course, with capital grants recently being reopened, that was a great announcement here at Groundswell. This is a good idea to start planning for in Land App. So we've got our fields, or our paddocks, if you like, and we might want to divide these into a bit smaller areas and draw our fences out through the draw function here. So I'll finish that one actually, draw another one. We can actually follow these lines in an interactive way in Land App. So it's actually hugging that line like so. Just draw that out across here. We'll put one fence there. We'll put another one up here like so. And then put one across like that. Ooh, there we go. Just leave that there. Oh, that didn't want one didn't finish, but oh well. And then we can maybe change the styling if we want to something dotted, and then assign that attribute, something like fence, and go cattle fence here. And again, you can overlay that onto your initial farm rotation plan. So yeah, of course, the benefits of having rotational grazing is that you give each little area of pasture a break and time to regenerate until the cows are moved back on. So good thing to illustrate there with your fencing in this plan. And that eventually just compiles into a more colourful map, which hopefully resonates with all of you there around you can illustrate quite nicely different regenerative practices. So it's quite a simple process, but I hope if you're an advisor working around advising these different practices to farms, or you're a farmer yourself and you want to just visualize the different great things you're doing, this is just a bit of a blueprint in which you can do that with. So I'll pause there and just move on to the next step, which I'm actually going to get up our Land App mobile app. Just move that across and bring that over like so, which, forgive me, you see all my notifications, but there we go. I'll open up Land App mobile here. This is available to all our standard users and professional users. So if you are in the free account at Land App, you won't be able to access this. If you do want to, please be encouraged to upgrade £15 per month per user to have a go with this. And we'll just search that map that we were just working on there, like so. So again, just to recap, this is using GPS. So it's taken me to the location that I'm in. I'm actually in the centre of Bristol, and that's my house there. But we can, from here, go and view all those plans that we've just created in Land App on our computer, all here. And that one just there, we'll look at the covers option here. And to view that in Land App, you need to Land App Mobile, you need to download that plan. You can do that by clicking that down arrow button there. I don't think you can see where I'm clicking, so I will just describe it as I go in. And we've got our plan downloaded now, so you'll be familiar with what we can see on the desktop, like so. I'll just turn that off. We can see that here in our mobile app. We can just zoom in and do really simple things. Like if I select that wheat field there and I want to split it, I can add a point, move across like so. Oh, I didn't add that. There we go. And we've just split that little area there. So if you're out in the field, you realize I probably want to cordon off this little area. You can do so with that split feature. If we wanted to actually take a photo, we can do that like so with that yellow plus button at the bottom. So in a case where you've got a cover crop that's looking really good in late September and want to take a photo and assign it to an area on your map, you can either click take photo, and that's actually of my living room, but just for the purpose of the demo, just call it living room. You could imagine something like cover crop, and that will actually place exactly where it was taken on the map, like so. So you can envisage the same when you're out in the field, want to take a photo of something, it will drop exactly where you need it to drop and it was taken. You could also, if we go back to that plan that we were working on, you can also upload photos too. So if you've got this setting enabled on Land app, you can select one of these. And I was down on the Southwest Coast Path over the weekend, and my geotag data is on. I've just uploaded that, and let's go, forgive me, all the way down to the southwest, and that photo is there, right on the coast where we were. So you can do it retrospectively too. You don't have to be in the field taking photo one by one if you've got a lot on. You can just take all the photos on your phone and then when back in the office, you can just upload them all in one go. And you can do that in bulk too. A really great asset in terms of looking at validating as well as recording different practices and what they look like at different times of year on your farm, like so. So I'll just stop and move that across and just turn it off like so because we won't go back in. Then going back to in the next sort of 10 minutes or so, I'll just show a few of those different data downloads that are available in Land app and accessible here. So we click new, click download data, and we've got a full list of what I call hidden gems available, that most of which are free, is worth mentioning, apart from the slope identifier, which I'll show you in a second, as well as the UK Habitat Best Guess Baseline, with a cost associated with that. And likewise with these first two options here, the Ordnance Survey, they're all licensed products. So there'll be a license, 12-month license associated with that. But what I've got available, I've actually prepared a few previously. Looking at that slope identifier, that is all based on Environment Agency LiDAR data. And it's given us this really quite interesting looking, contrasting in color map of where all the different gradients and slopes are. So this dark red we can see is a very high gradient above 11 degrees. So looking pretty steep there. Looking at this more sort of red, lighter red, got high, so 7 to 11. Looking at the orange, moderate, 3 to 7. And then right there, I think we've got low, 2 to 3. So what you can take from this kind of data, you can understand where it's likely, different crops are going to be successful in growing because we don't like too steep, but also where water is going to flow across the land. And we've got these two high bits, almost like a bit of a valley going through. It's likely that water's going to flow right along there. So again, this is going to help our decisions in terms of what direction we're planting crops or where we're putting livestock, or maybe thinking about things like agroforestry, keeping that perennial cover. And arguably, trees are kind of the best perennial cover out there. What direction and aspect we design that design for. Secondly, a really great one is this wild edges layer here. So this is basically going to suggest different areas on your map where there are hedgerows, so the marginal areas of your fields, of where it would be best to extend that kind of area of habitat and blocking and wind block that can be created from these. And it's just added on all the hedgerows that are existing a 3 meter, I think it's 3.5. Let's have a look. A 3 meter wide area of mixed scrub, and then also another 3 meter wide area of neutral grassland. But the idea here is just really improving the different marginal areas of land that might not be as productive with these extended habitats to help, again, relating back to those beelines where the ebbs and flows and the directions of travel could be for our pollinating insects. Secondly, quite a new one that's out is this vegetation area or vegetation layer that's from the Environment Agency's vegetation object model. So this again available to everyone in the free version and above. We've downloaded any vegetation, so this is hedgerows and trees that are above 2.5 meters. So not only is it visually really a nice tool or a nice layer to have in your map, and we'll put that against, we'll just move that down there. So we've got the layering right. We can put that against our BPS layer or crop rotation baseline layer. And we can see where all these predicted vegetation areas are. And it's going to help us, again, think about different interventions. Have I got to avoid that tree or even put a buffer around that tree to protect it if it's in a crop field, like so. Turning that one off, I am whizzing these through. We've got another one called the E-Planner, which is from the UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology. And this, again, is going to help us, or it suggests different areas or different habitats that are going to be best suited in what place on our map. So it's going to help us with different decisions. And we've got a series of 5 different types of birdseed, wet grass, woodland, water resource, and pollinators. We turn those all on. You can see it's quite a intricate and detailed set of data that you can download there. We'll just turn off these ones and focus on pollinators, and then turning on our BPS again. So looking at these arable fields that we're growing crops on, it's suggesting that these are key areas for pollinators. So I think you can take 2 things from this example. Those practices that we showed at the start around using different covers, flower-rich margins, etc., are really important in this area for optimizing pollinators that could be migrating across this farm here. And that can help with those decisions too. Thirdly, looking at wet landscapes. If I'll just zoom out a bit, we'll notice here what this tool does. It basically uses Environment Agency data to show on the map where the areas are that are most high risk of annual flooding. We've got 3 different colours here, a 0.1% annual chance in this light blue, a 1% chance in this kind of darker blue, and then lastly a 3.3 annual percent chance, showing you can see in Ed's farm, those 2 areas where we've got 2 quite high hillsides on the side here. It's showing that as that prone to flooding in that kind of valley dip that we see into this Phillimore here, I expect. It also shows areas on the map where possible interventions could be placed to help mitigate any negative impacts of that flooding as well. And we're thinking about continuous cover here with neutral grassland, but this can also suggest things like leaky dams, agroforestry, riparian buffer strips. I think that's all 4 that it's going to suggest for you. So you can take that away, run that tool, and see the different areas in which you could help mitigate any flooding that comes up. And then lastly, I'll try to whiz through this. We've got our agroforestry tool as well. I've mentioned agroforestry, trees being one of the key perennial covers We can introduce the farms. We can just select, perhaps, let's run with this one. Just quickly go through the workflow of how to create an agroforestry design. We want to just select the one field probably that we're working on to create this, because there is a limit of hectareage we can run in this tool to, I think, 70 hectares. So we'll just isolate this area here, call it agroforestry working. We just keep it in the blank template. You can see that's at the bottom there. We'll turn off our BPS covers and we've just got that one field. And it's a really simple process, very much like all the other data downloads. We'll select what type of design we're looking at. And this one, let's go for an in-field grid or dispersed. We've got this page here where we can set the parameters, if you like, for our download. So I've selected that working area. We'll give it just grid design. That's the name. Optionally, add an SBI number. You don't have to in this one, but we won't for now. We'll give it a headland, so a buffer around our agroforestry design. Let's just stick to 10, and we can change the density right up to, I think, 400, but let's just keep it quite low. Let's stick with 40. In the other design tools, particularly the silver arable design tool, we have those kind of rows, if you like, in arable fields. You can actually choose what aspect you're putting those rows in, and that might change for different needs. It could be a north to south facing aspect if you've got fruit trees, so optimizing sun and shade there. But it could be in a water context. You want to put them across where the slope is going, just to create sort of barriers for infiltration, and stopping that water flowing thick and fast in channels, which we might get through a north-south aspect. So that should, now that we've let that run, be ready very quickly. And yeah, it's already ready for us. We've got populated this agroforestry design. Just to quickly talk it through, we've got that initial working area. It's not plotted our design in anywhere where there's existing vegetation. And it's also given an excluded area where it's labeled a road or track. So that's handy there. It doesn't want to put any trees where that is. And you can see quite simply, we've got a really nice agroforestry design on our map. And it's given us sheltered broadleaf. It's probably a silvo pasture type design in the grid design where our animals will be grazing, will be protected from the shade from the trees, and improving the soil all the while. So I'll take a pause there. And I can see there's questions coming in. I'll just jump over back to Q&A, and I think Rosie is shared or written down those questions for me. So we've got one from Kate Bliss. Thank you, Kate, for sending that through. Is there a simple way to make the buffer just along one boundary, i.e. watercourse? Yes, there is quite an easy way to do that. Kate, I wonder if I quickly show you now. Essentially, you could either create the buffer in the one field and then split the buffer where the area along you want to have that just one buffer on one side, if you like, and then merge the other side of the buffer that's already there, but you don't want it, essentially creating that field again. It might be worth me showing you. Or you could draw a line as well. Let's have a look. So that's just using this working area. One way I've done it, you could either split it along like that. It's quite a squiggly buffer, but you could just use a straight line like so. Or you could create the buffer, which I've just explained there, like so, and then split the area that you want. Oh, it didn't work there. Maybe that option isn't the one to use, but there is the ability, I'm sure. Rosie, do you have any advice on that one?
Will, you want to draw a line down one side and then you can just buffer
Yeah,
on the line.
let's run with that. So I'm just drawing a line here, like so, and then giving that a buffer. Nice. Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, I didn't know that one. So there you go, Kate. That's one way to do it. Just drawing a line on the kind of course that you want to go on and adding a buffer there. Um, and then a second question from Kate. From your experience, how important is it having good quality data when making the shift to regen? It's very important. I think it differs from different people, right? Different farmers might have different needs or resources of what they want to do. There might be other factors influencing what kind of data um, is collected from Regen Ag. I think data, and this goes for any kind of land-based decisions, the more the better when before you're making them. So, for example, those data downloads that we showed there, we were basing all of those data downloads on authoritative data mainly. So it's from the likes of Natural England, Environment Agency, UKCEH. So it's sound data being used to determine the outputs of those tools there. So hopefully that answers your question. I think it is a really important thing, and that is our mantra. But that goes for a whole range of different other decisions that farmers might be wanting to make around regen ag, around soils. We don't cover that much in Land App ourselves. Other really great platforms do, and obviously soil being at the kind of the forefront of regenerative agriculture. So that's one other thing to be looking at. Okay. Don't seem to have many other questions unless some trickle through now. Um, Anything else to cover there, Rosie, do you think, on that last question around data?
Um, no, I think you kind of yeah, you nailed it on the head. You could go through just printing, Will, how you would create an output, or even the tabular data as well.
Sure. Um, Starting at tabular data then, and I guess this definitely relates to any kind of reporting that one might want to do. With any plans in Land App, you can view them as a table through two different ways, actually, starting with clicking on the three dots against the plan and clicking table view. And we've got a whole tabular breakdown of those different parcels that we've created in the plan. And in this case, it's the BPS. So we've got the land use codes, what their description is, the total area. Oops. And we've also got things down here because we use that RPA BPS imports. We've got the parcel IDs, field IDs, etc., and our SBI. And then we can download that into an Excel um, from Land App, which might be, if you're using this data in other places, you can do so. And then secondly, looking at it, is this reports function here at the top. So we can come to this page, then add a plan. So we'll look at that BPS demo up here. Just click done. And then very quickly, it would generate this more kind of aggregated form, I guess, of the breakdown in the different parcels in terms of their classification or description. The count, so that's the number of different features on the map that are there. So we've got, for example, 42 features of non-agricultural land, and we've got the breakdown too in terms of area, percentage of the total map itself, map boundary. So again, this is if you want a really quick snapshot of kind of the assets, if you like, across any map, you can do so from here. And it's worth mentioning too, when I've added kind of bespoke attributes, so like I did with drilled, or that could be harvested. Um, that will be included in those tables as well. Um, so looking at, I think we've just had another question in, so perhaps focus on that in the next 4 minutes that we have left. From Mark Charlton. Thank you, Mark. We have a report for our Land Through the Rivers trusts about rain flow, which is a little more detailed than the one you demonstrated. How do I easily import the data and make it into a layer? Yeah, it's a good question. So in LandApp, we are interoperable with any other GIS files. So, Mark, you could import using this method here. I'll click New, Import Data, and click that option, Import File. Any GIS files that you have, so GeoJSON, it could be a shapefile, KML, and we also support DXS, DXF, and TAB. You could try importing them into LandApp and start mapping from there. So the answer is yes. I think in certain cases where these file formats, it depends on sometimes how data is formatted within the files that you're importing. So it's worth checking that and testing that trial. But again, we're always on hand. If maps don't quite look like they should be, we're here to help on that. So the answer is yes on that front. We've got another question in from Anonymous. When using the mobile app, can it track where I am and use a line to walk to create a feature on the map? Yes. So if you, like I showed, you drew a line just by drawing that feature, adding a point. Once you've added that first point to effectively start the line, you could walk or you could drive, or if you're on a buggy, just keep that open in terms of the line. When you move, then once you're done, you can just click add points again and click finish, effectively tracking where you're going. At the moment, I believe there are only quite straight lines. So for really quite intricate squiggly lines, perhaps we're not there yet in terms of tracking where you're going. But certainly, if you're drawing any features, lines, or areas for that matter, or just adding points as you're moving about, it tracks where you are. So you can create that in a way at the moment. We've got another one coming in. Can you intake data from sensors on the ground, such as soil moisture probes? So we don't have the ability to test moisture or things like pH or sap testing, although that's leaves. But any soil related measurements, we don't have that in LandApp. What you can do though is again looking at the mobile app, you can plot different points of where samples might be taken in your fields in LandApp Mobile. And we do have a soil sampling template that helps users do that. So certainly you're able to plot those different sample areas. But in terms of the kind of more advanced soil analysis that I know is it relates to Kate's question, a really important thing in different cases around regenerative agriculture. You won't be able to do in LandApp currently, but there's that dual function, I guess, with the different points. Looking at another question from Mark, if you take photos and don't have data on by mistake, for example, do you have to return to the LandApp and redo it, or can you plot the photo manually? I think what you mean there, well, there's two sides, Mark. You don't need to have data on to take photos in LandApp, I don't believe. But I think what you're getting at there, if you haven't got data, does the kind of geotagged location log? To be honest with you, I don't know if it does rely on data to get that georeference location, but I have a feeling it doesn't. Again, that uses GPS, I believe. So it's worth trying that out, and I might give it a go after this. Um, it's worth saying that kind of recommendation if you do need to or you're unsure. It's a good idea just to take lots of photos sometimes on your phone and then upload them back. But realize in some cases that might not be the route you want to take. But yeah, I'll definitely try that out, Mike, and get back to you. I think after this, just send a follow up because I want to find out too. But thank
Um,
you.
well, I'll add to that. You can take photos
Okay,
offline, and because it's GPS located, so they'll just not sync straight away until you're back in signal. But they'll be GPS located even if you're offline.
brilliant. Thanks, Rosie. You've answered it for us. Um, awesome. Okay, I don't think there's many questions left, and we've come to 1 o'clock, so we'll finish there. But just to say thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it, and for sending those questions through. We do have another webinar coming up. I think it's in August or maybe September around diversification. So it'll be a more guest type webinar. It won't be demo focused. We'll have some guests joining us for that webinar around different I guess, approaches and opportunities around diversification on farms, which, yeah, very much hope you can all attend. And we will be sending out advertising around that in a couple of weeks' time. So look forward to it. And thank you again, everyone. I'll close the meeting now.